Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 20th of January, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today is co-host Charles Malet. Welcome to the programme, Charles.
Thank you, Mike.
And by video link, we are joined by Vanessa Beeley. Now, later in the programme, we'll be looking at the latest censorship efforts by Ofcom and their international colleagues, child abuse in Israel, and the reform of policing. But we're going to begin today with digital government. People across the UK could benefit from faster, safer and more reliable public services as leading British AI specialists join government to modernise critical systems used every day, from public safety to transport maintenance. These are the words of Keir Starmer's digital minister, Ian Murray. So I'm sure we were all impressed by that. But anyway, the effort is going to be underpinned by £1 million from Meta and will be run through the Alan Turing Institute. And the group of AI experts are going to develop open source tools to what they describe as tackle some of the biggest challenges facing public services. Now, this all comes part of the new I didn't show the Alan Turing Institute there, but there we go. This all comes as part of the new Customer First initiative. And Customer First, by the way, spelt as one word, without any gaps between customer and first. And that's going to put modern technology to work to cut out long phone queues, reduce paperwork and make it easier and faster for people to access the services they rely on. These are all their words. It's fantastic propaganda. But anyway, right there with that quote, we get an idea of what this is actually about, because as we all know, the long wait times on phones when people want to access the likes of HMRC or any other so-called customer-facing service provided by the state are a deliberate ploy to force people to accept the digital panopticon that Shabana Mahmood is so keen on. So let's just remind ourselves what she said when she was speaking to Tony Blair a short while ago. AI and technology can be transformative to the whole law and order space. And she was talking about the need to use AI and technology to transform the justice system. She cited Jeremy Bentham and his Panopticon. Now, we're going to come on to what that is in a second, if anybody doesn't know. And she was absolutely talking about the idea of pre-crime and using AI to make judgments on what people were going to do in the future. But coming back to Customer First for a second, it describes itself as a new unit within the government digital service. And very much echoing Dominic Cummings of a few years ago, they say they've been set up to explore a fresh way of working in government and operating with the pace and curiosity of a startup. This is Dominic Cummings' kind of language. And they say that their work aligns directly with the roadmap for modern digital government, which has just been published. And once again, we see statements from politicians delivered with not a hint of irony, because this is the comment from the Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, Liz Kendall, saying, when we came into government, the Prime Minister made a commitment to the British people that politics would tread lightly on people's lives. So I'm just going to ask, do you all feel lightly trodden on? Because I don't. Now, she went on to describe all the benefits of the new Panopticon for the sleep-deprived parent trying to sort childcare, the homeowner getting planning permission, the worried patient looking for booking a doctor's appointment. She said that life is busy and our role as a government should be to carry the burden in these moments, not add to it. And so this plan sets out how we do this by embracing AI, removing outdated IT, and strengthening our cyber resilience in the face of new threats. So let's just have a look at what this brave new world has in store for you and for me. So they're talking about managing health records, appointments and prescriptions in one place through the NHS app. They're talking about using the gov.uk app to access personalised services and notifications, securely store and share digital versions of important documents, like your driving licence, using the gov.uk wallet, quickly and securely proving your identity using the new digital ID, accessing simpler, faster digital services for tax, driving, vehicle and immigration, using a new careers service, bringing the support you need together to understand your skills and use them to find or change jobs. But also benefit from targeted support to improve digital skills and confidence and address data and device poverty. This is incredible stuff. Access better care for children because data will be joined up across services. And if you're in business, it's good for you too. As anybody that's already in business knows, you've had to identify yourself to Companies House, for example, but this will mean that you can access government services with a single secure login for businesses. Now, we've discussed one login before and how it's not in the least bit secure, but we can talk about that later. Manage and tax and customs obligations through a modern digital-first system. Sell technology and services to government through simplified procurement processes. Find talent faster using smarter candidate matching tools. Quickly and securely verify your employees' right to work through a secure process. So, we at the UK column are warning about these kinds of things. We have also been warning, as we did last week, about Palantir and their complete access to NHS patient data. And when the Electronic Frontier Foundation are warning about ICE agents in the US using Palantir's access to US health data to run their operations, then we might ask ourselves what the Starmer regime is building here. Just what exactly is it? So let's just finish this by reminding ourselves what the Panopticon is. It's the idea proposed by the so-called philosopher Jeremy Bentham in 1791. Of a theoretical circular prison design, allowing a single central observer to watch all inmates without being seen, based on the central inspection principle, and it aims to reform behavior through constant surveillance and the psychological internalized feeling of being watched. He described it as power of mind over mind. So we're talking about a cylindrical building with a central inspector's lodge and outer cells with light passing through so that there's backlighting. So the entire prison population, as I say, could be watched by a single guard. Now, Bentham designed this for prisons, but he also intended it for schools, for factories, for asylums, as he talked about it. And he was talking about maximizing utility, productivity, and order. And this is clearly now what is being built, what Mahmoud is talking about being absolutely desirous of. And so this goes way beyond just simple digital ID.
It absolutely does. And for a roadmap, it really is attempting to join everything together. And I think really the way that this should be looked at is through the lens of considering why it is that they only suggest that there will be positive outcomes. There is absolutely no suggestion that this is a balance or a trade-off, or that there could be any downsides. And I think that should really raise a red flag to anybody hearing about this. The idea that changing something wholesale is not going to have any undesirable consequence is an absolutely extraordinary and therefore completely unlikely outcome. I think that's a big part of it. There's no concession at all to the inherent vulnerability of putting everything in the same place. I think the idea that that setting this out and using the sorts of language, as you say, that Dominic Cummings might have been proud to have put together is just disingenuous beyond compare, because there are example upon example of systems like this failing. And I think the greater the centralization, the greater the danger if there is a failure. And I think that's one of the things, I mean, among many that absolutely are not being talked about and presumably will not get talked about unless this is raised as an issue at the local levels and is effectively pushed back uphill, because there is no real debate or discussion about this, I think.
I mean, we're going to be talking about China towards the end of the program. And of course, what we're constantly seeing is people looking at China and making claims about social credit systems and so on, and worrying about what's going on over there. No concern generally because they can't believe that this would be the type of infrastructure that's being built here. But it absolutely is. So, we got to be aware of what's going on in our own country. Many people are, but limiting it just to digital ID is not going far enough. Vanessa, I'd be interested to get an idea of what kind of experience people in the Middle East are having of this type of policy. Is there, or are there attempts in Southwest Asia to bring this type of thing in?
Well, obviously, apart from inside Israeli prisons, where where, of course, there is a huge degree of surveillance and dehumanization. I'm not sure. I mean, here, definitely not. We might have just got biometric in some of the passport offices, or some, but generally it doesn't work very well. UAE, of course, has just joined Pax Silica, which is the complex of all of the countries involved in basically introducing AI digital control in the future, which has very much Israel at its center. So I would say in the Zionist bloc, in the countries that were created by Britain to support Israel, for example, like Saudi Arabia, but particularly UAE, you might be finding it, but not to this level, no.
Okay, thank you for that. But of course, related to this then, Charles, is policing, because obviously Mahmoud was very clear that one of the major applications of this would be the idea of pre-crime and getting the police 100% on board. What is the Starmer's vision for policing in the UK then?
Well, this is exactly it. And I should say, if you didn't watch Monday's UK column news, then you should, of course, because Ben Rubin was articulating initial thoughts on the idea of police reform, because, of course, at that stage, no documentation had actually been produced. It has now been produced, and Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, has had quite a lot to say about it. Here she is tweeting that today's reforms mark the biggest shake-up to policing in 200 years. So what she's doing there in terms of setting the scene is trying to invoke the spirit of Peel, who is credited, of course, with starting the idea of a sort of formalised police force in the first place. Now, I would put it that she has not really read around the subject. And to qualify that, I would just make the point, first of all, that in her introduction to the document, she talks about the suggestion that the police is broken, but then counters that by saying that arrests are up by 5%. And I think this articulates the very centre of the problem. And we'll just look at the first of the Peelian principles in order to get an idea of what I mean by that. Now, the first one is that the basic mission for which the police exists is to prevent crime and disorder. Now, arrests are not by nature preventative, although, as Mike's just been alluding to, we will watch this space. So the fundamental issue appears to be that Shabana Mahmood and others are confusing the solving of crime with stopping crime, and they are two very, very different things. Now, to move on from what it was set out by Peel all those years ago, we'll look at the document itself and just pull a few things out from the executive summary and indeed her opening remarks. And straight back to what Mike's been talking about, really. Serious and organised crime is growing, and 9 in every 10 crimes now has a digital component. Now, that's a very significant point to make when one is suggesting that the answer to that is further and further digitisation. They go on to say, and I've pulled out just sort of selective parts that I think all merit some consideration. We will modernise legislation such as the Public Order Act 1986 to ensure that the police are clearer about where the line stands between freedom of speech and criminality. Now, we've seen that that line absolutely blurred and, let's say, very much not lightly trodden over the last few years. What is it exactly they mean by this? Of course, the Public Order Act 1986 has the more obvious offences, or at least perhaps clearer offences of riot, violence, disorder and affray, but the controversial ones being fear or provocation of violence and the harassment offences, but effectively turning the offence itself into a subjective affair because, of course, it's for the victim to report how they felt about the particular incident in question. Now, with further digitisation, it's hard to see how this is going to turn out any better for either apparent victims or suspects in those situations. Now, the document goes on to talk about rolling out artificial intelligence, AI-powered tools and software to automate manual processes, saving the police valuable time so that it can be redirected towards serving the public. Again, to suggest that that is simply a fait accompli because you can say that it will save time and therefore there will be an outright benefit is a claim that requires, again, much further investigation. But this is absolutely the theme of the document and very much follows Mike's report about putting out these totally unqualified positives that seem to have veered so far away from the status quo as to be very, very questionable. Also, in terms of the control structures, and this is what Ben was surmising on Monday, the police and crime commissioners will be abolished and they'll be replaced directly with directly elected mayors. And where mayors do not yet exist, with policing and crime boards made up of local council leaders. And this is said that the new system of police governance will reintegrate policing back into the system of local government in England and Wales, enabling greater collaboration across local services. Now, again, if one assumes good faith, that could in some ways be the case. However, just to qualify it a bit, to reintegrate back into local politics, it cannot really be what it sounds like. Because, of course, as Ben was intimating on Monday, partly this is because the nature of local politics has changed such an enormous amount in the intervening period, but also because of the capabilities in data collection and sharing between all the various agencies that will be involved in this, and of course the many, many digital compromises and vulnerabilities that are inherent in doing any of that. And we return to the Peelian principles, because we look at this one, which says police seek and preserve public favour, not by catering to the public opinion, but by constantly demonstrating absolute impartial service to the law. Now, involving police hierarchy with local politicians, given the state of affairs in local politics, local democracy, if we can still call it that nowadays, I would say, again, is another significant compromise. Now, of course, this document has come out. It's making great claims to turn the police over in a productive sense for more than they have been in 200 years. Therefore, there's been inevitable sort of commentary and response to this. As far as police bodies are concerned, there's been almost universal applause for the reforms as they're set out, with the exception of the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners. Now, given that I've just read out text saying they're going to be abolished, it would be easy to say that that's sour grapes. But in fact, I think we should look at the point they make, which is there is also a risk that the National Police Service could stifle local innovation and restrict the ability of local communities to shape how policing affects their lives. And large regional forces risk weakening local responsiveness and accountability while introducing unnecessary complexity and cost. I should have said that which I'll come on to in a bit, but that one of the solutions to the problem is the idea of a national police service, which again, Ben was talking about on Monday, referring to it as a sort of a rehashed version of the FBI. Now, we're going to look at, or rather listen to, what it was that Shabana Mahmood said in the House of Commons about one of the points that is bound to provoke, well, should certainly provoke a fair degree more debate.
While some forces surge ahead with the results to show for it, others are fighting crime in a digital age with analogue methods. We will ensure that every force is adopting the latest technology led out of the new National Police Service. And this will include the largest ever rollout of live facial recognition technologies across England and Wales. We know this approach works. In London, in just 2 years, the Metropolitan Police have made 1,700 arrests, taking robbers, domestic abusers, and rapists off our streets. When the future arrives, there are always doubters. 100 years ago, fingerprinting was decried as curtailing our civil liberties, but today we could not imagine policing without it. I have no doubt the same will prove true of facial recognition technology in the years to come. At the same time, we will launch Police.ai, investing a record £115 million in AI and automation to make policing more effective and efficient, stripping admin away to ensure officer time can be devoted to the human factor that only a police officer.
So as far as she's concerned, job done. We've got computers; they can do it. We can all step back, and that's that. Now, I think it's not quite that simple, and certainly in terms of the symmetry or indeed asymmetry, she's suggesting that the answer to a digital threat is a digital solution, whereas, of course, in actual fact, to pervade an analog setup with a digital invasion is impossible. And again, that's absolutely being glossed over, and again relates exactly back to what Mike's been reporting on. Now, the other thing is that, again, exactly like Mike says, she's talking about thought crime and pre-crime. That's exactly where we're going with this, with live facial recognition, because otherwise, how would she be able to say that that has delivered the effect that it has? And again, concentrating on arrests rather than actually the prevention of the crime in the first place. Now, as you just heard us talk about the announcement of the AI capability, she made the mistake of giving the website address of police AI, and you'd think that somebody might have just popped a holding page up there, but not so. And since AI is heralded as the future, I did ask it to generate an image of the success that Mahmoud and the proposed National Police Service are pointing towards. Now, as a sign of things to come, this is what was produced. Now, at first glance, you may not see much wrong with that. And if you can't see it, I should point out that it's sort of 2 and a bit police officers wearing an extraordinary array of kit, including masks covering their face. Shabana Mahmood has been turned into a journalist. And then when you look more closely, you'll see that the police constable on the left of the frame is missing his head. Now, I was confused by this at first, but actually I see that it is an accurate rendition, and I've taken advantage of the UK Columns graphics department to correct the image. So if we can just go full screen again, please, Chris. This is exactly what's being suggested. We are replacing the human brain with a computer. We are surrendering the human mind to the bias of artificial intelligence. Now, the answer proposed is, in terms of this reform, is a national police service. And, one should concede, at least, that there are some sensible points made. And they say that as one force, it will be better equipped to share technology, intelligence, and resources to stop the growing threat from crime that has become increasingly complex, digital, online, and with no respect for constabulary borders. Now, I can talk a bit more about this in extra, but there are absolutely great frictions associated with having 43 constabularies within England alone, England and Wales, I should say. And there are absolutely efficiencies to be gained there, but that's taking it at face value and, of course, ignoring the very many pitfalls to centralisation, which I think is what the APCC are trying to get at. But they're pointing towards the advantages of procuring technology, clothing, and general sort of cost saving. They're also saying that they can recruit another 13,000 more neighbourhood police, and they are trying to separate those on the beat from the admin burden. Again, would be an effective move, but only if done correctly. Now, on vetting and personnel disasters, there's a plan to introduce a license to practice, which is going to be managed by the College of Policing. But again, the issue with this is it's not really made clear how just having a license would actually enhance the situation. So there's more to come out on that. And we look further, again, to have the Beelian principle of maintaining the relationship with the public that gives reality to the historic tradition that the police are the public and the public are the police. Again, something I think that's been glossed over very much in the reforms as they're put forward now. And I don't know if we've got time to just show a quick
Go ahead.
Video clip. Really just to get to the point of considering whether or not police are actually thinking about what they're doing. Katharine Gun, who will be known to many of the UK column audience, was stopped whilst coming into the UK recently, and this is a short clip of her experiences.
At the top of the metal stairway were 3 police officers, and as soon as we stepped our foot out of the plane, we heard them say, "Are you Katharine Gun?" and my daughter's name. And I was like, yes. And it was a shock to be asked by police officers as soon as we stepped off the plane. And so we went down the steps, and my daughter was taken by a female police officer to one side of the stairs, and I was taken by 2 other police officers, 2 male officers, to the other side of the stairs. So we were separated. And then basically the male police officers asked me, they said, we have been contacted by members of the flight crew who were concerned about child safeguarding. And I was like, well, what's the evidence? There is no evidence. What the hell are they talking about? And they demanded that I give them my husband's name, our address in Turkey. And I was like, why should I give you that information? I'm not being, are you charging me with anything? But he basically threatened me with taking me to the border force and dragging out the whole process if I didn't give him our address. They didn't ask for any evidence. They didn't ask for our passports or anything.
So Catherine's experiences there, which could have been over in seconds if they'd simply asked for passports, but the inference there was that she might have been involved in child trafficking. And again, I just put it forward that there is a reduced element of thought in policing in general. And so just to finish off, the last point from the Peelian principles, which is that the test of police efficiency is the absence of crime and disorder, not the visible evidence of police action in dealing with it. And it looks very much like Mahmoud's reforms are absolutely meant to provide the evidence of dealing with it rather than the absence of crime and disorder.
Thank you, Charles. Vanessa, over to you then. And we're going to have a look at Israel and child abuse. Now take your time.
Yeah, of course, child abuse, as we've been demonstrating for some time, is really systemic in Israel, not only against the Palestinians, who, of course, are dehumanized beyond belief and tortured in some of the most sadistic ways, but even within their own society. And coming back to the police issue, it's fascinating that the people who are being arrested by the police in the UK are the people that are literally exposing the crimes from within Israeli society. So again, we have to question what exactly the police are there to do in the UK, and perhaps we can discuss that further in Extra. But actually, this is a follow-up. This is a recent case where a cyber CEO was found guilty of statutory rape, assaulted children as young as 4 years old, and multiple minor underage rape cases from him. This is Itai Levy. We actually covered this story, I think, about a year ago, but now he has been found guilty and convicted. And of course, he was connected. He was the CEO of Cornelius, which is a major cyber security company. And again, of course, this brings us back to the fact that, of course, much of the cybersecurity, the data storage, the health and education, Ministry of Defense information is going to be stored by individuals that are certainly have their roots in the Israeli spy agencies. But seeing to what extent this sexual predator nature is prevalent in Israeli society, we also have to start raising questions about this. This was, I think, a few days ago, an IDF, so a military reservist, convicted in large-scale online child sexual abuse case. Content warning. Well, I am going to show the content because there's a couple of things in there that I would really like to discuss further in Extra. So let's have a look at what the case actually involved. So apparently he used technology he found online that allowed him to appear and sound like a woman during video calls. During those conversations, he instructed the men to carry out sexual acts against their minor children. This is my first question. How on earth can you persuade a father, a parent, to actually conduct or carry out sexual abuse against their own children? This included infants and very young children, and to document the abuse and send him the footage. It detailed a series of impersonations that led to sexual abuse within families. In one case, he posed as a woman while speaking with the father of a 1.5-year-old girl and directed him to carry out sexual acts in the child's room during a video call. In another case, using the alias Maria, he persuaded a father to sexually abuse his young son, telling him the child would not remember because of his age. Prosecutors said Alfie also communicated under female identities with dozens of other social media users, including minors, convincing them to perform sexual acts on themselves, record the acts, and send the material to him. Investigators found more than 150 files containing child sexual abuse material in his possession. I wonder where online safety was in Israel. And then I want to come on to the latest report from an Israeli human rights organization based in the occupied territories, B'Tselem, Living Hell. This is a follow-up from their previous report, which was called Welcome to Hell, published in August 2024. The Israeli prison system is a network of torture camps. So let's have a look at what they actually say. Now, they do give content warning, sexual violence, and I will show a screenshot from the actual report. You can freeze frame and read it at will, or of course, the link to the report will be in the show notes. But let's have a look at the actual screenshot. Now, what this is talking about is multiple cases of rape sorry, it's very difficult to talk about this, with objects, human beings raping women and men within the Israeli forces, by the way, conducted these rapes, and appalling torture, basically attacking people's genitals, bringing dogs in to urinate on prisoners and so on. Absolutely appalling. I mean, I wonder what on earth I'm reading when you go through that report. And this is just a very short section of one of the videos from the first report, Welcome to Hell, which, as I said, was published in August. So let's just play this.
يتناوبوا يدفعوني برجلهم، اللي بضربني برجله على بطني على ظهري. وفي مرة وقفوا جنديين على ظهري لمدة 3 دقايق. يعني هون هدول ال3 دقايق حسيت إنه خلص، يعني أنا انتهيت.
من تحدث لي بشكل واضح أسير من الأسرى قال لي أخ أبو أحمد أنا تعرضت للاغتصاب، بمعنى أنهم قاموا بوضع العصا في المنطقة الحساسة لهذا الأسير.
أيام حقيقة لا تنسى.
So again, as I said, with Britain getting closer and closer, every single political party in the UK being friends of, or having a section which is friends of Israel, we need to really start wondering to what extent they are aware of and are involved in what is going on.
Yes, well done, Vanessa, for covering that, because this is not something that we're hearing from anybody else, as far as I'm aware, in the UK at least, so we need to have more insight into these types of problems in that part of the world. Now, let's move on then. UK Column, of course, only continues to operate with your assistance. So if you can possibly help us financially, that would be really appreciated. There is a section on the UK Column website that you can find by getting to the front page and get all the details for how you can help us out that way. If you can't help us financially, please do at least share this program, any of the articles on the website, any of the podcasts that you enjoy, please share those, and that helps us beat the censorship regime. Now, tonight, Jerem is going to be speaking to David Weiss about Flat Earth, apparently, so join him at 7 o'clock for that. We've got something to say about that just after the ad break here. And then the Silk and Steel podcast with Carl Zah is going to be talking about Mark Carney and his comments at Davos. But I just want to briefly mention David Weiss being on with Jerm tonight. Of course, Jerm covers a wide range of topics, and he is not in any way restrictive about who he speaks to, and we wouldn't attempt to restrict who he speaks to. But David Weiss, I do have a bit of a problem with, because, of course, he, aside from the topic itself, he pushes forward an app, which is how he apparently funds his activities. This is Consumer Rights Wiki, which is run by Lewis Rossman, who is a fantastic advocate for consumer rights and for right to repair and so on, and is really the man behind the Clippy campaign, if anybody's aware of that. But what this is pointing out is that basically for the last number of years, Weiss has been pushing out this app, which people can get access to through their various phones and so on, but that he is completely lax with his security, and therefore people's personal information, their email address, their password, their location on the planet, and so on, is easily downloadable from the app. Now, he's been warned about this for years and refuses to do anything about it. So I think it's just worth mentioning that, because obviously if you do support him using this app, you are putting any personal information that you give at risk. So that's just what I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, good.
Okay, let's move on to reform, Charles.
Yes, no, it's the weekly update, which started and has absolutely been worth continuing, because there has been yet another defection, and it just goes to show that there is a theme that has emerged. And here we are seeing Suella Braverman with Netanyahu, proudly showing her photograph on Twitter. Admittedly, that was back a couple of years ago, but she talks about the strong relationship between Israel and the United Kingdom. And if you've missed previous updates on reform, you'll know that that is exactly the theme that I have been referring to. And the question is in whose interest? We've had Nigel Farage now going to Davos, protesting, of course, that he's going to be pursuing the idea of national sovereignty for the United Kingdom. But in actual fact, everything is pointing in the other direction. Here we have Braverman back in 2015 on a sponsored visit to Israel by the Conservative Friends of Israel. And just to remind you what the Conservative Friends of Israel actually do, they say that we aim to ensure Israel's case is fairly represented in Parliament, and that means in the Parliament of the United Kingdom. Now, what business Israel's case has being represented by parliamentarians who are supposed to represent their constituencies is not made quite clear. Now, Braverman, you may recall, is married to Raoul Braverman, who is also involved with the Reform Party, and early last year, about a year ago, was making overtures to the Board of Deputies, in effect, to convince them that actually reform was a natural home for people of Jewish faith. And again, just for context on this, it shouldn't be regarded as coincidence that Suella Braverman was Home Secretary back in 2023 when the current conflict took hold. And I wrote an article back then called Home Secretary Picks a Side for the Police. And I would encourage you to read it, because what she did to police there, first of all, was an abuse of her position as Home Secretary, in that she was trampling all over police operational independence, but also she was absolutely skewing the narrative completely in favour of Israel. And this is where reform is going.
Thank you for that, Charles. Now, let's talk about censorship for a second, because it's 6 months since Ofcom began enforcing age verification in the UK, and the effect on freedom of speech, of course, has been chilling. Vanessa and Alex Creel have both reported on the misuse of the requirements to censor on Substack. And more people are choosing not to look at content rather than to submit to the age verification regime. Well, Ofcom has now announced that the Global Online Safety Regulators Network, just put that back on screen, Chris, which brings together online safety regulators across the world, has set out its views and expectations on what they describe as the important role age assurance plays in the global effort to protect children. Now, let's be absolutely clear about this. It plays no role in protecting children, as we'll come on to in a second. Now, in the UK, age checks they describe it as the cornerstone of the Online Safety Act, and they say that their rules requiring sites and apps to have highly effective age assurance have been enforced since July, and that they're currently monitoring services compliance, and that they've opened 83 investigations into adult websites as part of their enforcement program, and that they have recently fined one service provider, AVS, £1 million for failing to have highly effective age assurance checks in place. And this is because the pornography industry is the poster child for all of this. The justification, which is supposed to make it acceptable in the minds of the public. And in an effort to build opposition to the policy, then the biggest porn site, Pornhub, has decided to restrict access to its site to UK users from next week. But as we've been reporting, despite claims of plummeting viewer numbers of Pornhub here in the UK, it's clear that people have been taking to VPN use to subvert the age verification requirement. And this has been recognised. And so the House of Lords has decided to vote that age verification should be extended to VPN use, confirming what we suggested was going to happen at the time, that VPNs would become a target for political interference. Now, this comes as an amendment, Amendment 92 to the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill, and the amendment's been proposed by Lord Nash. Amendment 92 would insert a new clause titled Action to Prohibit the Provision of VPN Services to Children in the United Kingdom, and it requires that within 12 months of the Act being passed, the Secretary of State must make regulations prohibiting VPN services from being provided to children, and that's described as under 18s. VPN providers may be required to apply age assurance that is highly effective at correctly determining or not the person is a child, that Ofcom would produce guidance for VPN providers on compliance, and that the government would establish a monitoring regime with enforcement measures and penalties for non-compliance. But as has been pointing out time and time again, none of this does anything to protect children, who are by far put at risk. Far and away, the biggest risk online is by adults posing as children on websites like Roblox that have no age assurance requirement to confirm that users are actually children. The biggest risk to children is from grooming, and these are the types of platforms. Roblox is the type of platform where that kind of thing happens, as highlighted by Miller Law on screen at the moment. All this in the show notes, so do pay attention on the UK Column website to the show notes for this. But then moving on from here, of course, Australia decided that under 16 should be banned from any social media use recently. France has now decided to do the same thing. So they've passed a bill that will ban social media use by under 15s in their case. And this, of course, was championed by Macron as a way to protect children from too much screen time. So the National Assembly has adopted that. It will go to the Senate and so on. Macron very excited about this. It's a major step, apparently, in dealing with this. And then finally, I just want to mention just before we get on to the finally, we'll just mention, of course, this is absolutely happening in the UK as well, because the proposals are in. Here's the House of Commons Library, proposals to ban social media for children. So this is coming to the UK as well. And finally, I'll just mention what's been going on with TikTok, because TikTok users are saying they can't upload anti-ICE videos in the United States. TikTok themselves are saying that this is as a result of tech issues. The BBC covering this as well. TikTok US pushes back on claims it's censoring content. Now, they're saying that this is because of tech issues. It may well be. What I'll say is that if it is genuine, then this is an example of the next step, which of course is that content gets scanned before it's uploaded, and it's prevented from being uploaded in the first place if it's content that they don't like. What I'm going to say about purely anecdotal, I'll accept, but our personal experience with TikTok is that it is, despite its claims that it's not censoring people, it is the most censorious social media platform out there. And so I'm highly skeptical about their claims that this was just sort of some kind of technical accidental thing. But so the censorship regime moves on apace. But let's come back to Vanessa then. Vanessa, lots been going on, particularly in northeast Syria with the Kurds.
Yes, I thought I better swing back to Syria, because there is there has been a lot going on for the last few years, but there is a lot of clashes going on between the Kurds and the Jolani HTS Takfiri forces. And it appears that despite the fact that allegedly the Kurds fought ISIS in Syria for years, now the US allies say they've been abandoned. And this is the general narrative. Now, of course, from my perspective, having lived in Syria, the Kurds, backed by the United States, effectively occupied northeast Syria and took control of the oil resources and the agricultural resources, and in my opinion, were absolutely pivotal to the fall of Syria by energy depriving the Syrian people and also depriving them of agricultural resources from Syrian territory in the northeast on behalf of the United States. And in fact, former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad said this in 2019 in relation to the Kurds. We tell those groups who are betting on the Americans that the Americans will not protect you. They will put you in their pockets so that you can be a bargaining chip. And he was always very clear, as was leadership of the Lebanese resistance, that the Kurds would, as they have historically, be betrayed by the United States. Now, I just wanted to show, I think this is a map from 2019, which shows the territory that then was under the control, even up to December 2024, that was under control of the Kurds, which is the yellow section. The green sections in the north there that are under the control of the Turkish military and their proxies. But if we look at a very recent map, this is January 2026, it's a little bit confusing, but the two red circles there are basically where the Kurdish forces and civilians have been forced to withdraw to, as they call it, Kobani and Hasaka, so Kobani in the north and Hasaka in the northeast, of course, surrounded by the Turkish proxies and now by HTS. And of course, surprise, surprise, perhaps for some, is the fact that ISIS are now being released. I'll come on to that. This is a statement by Tom Barrack in the last couple of days. So he's basically now saying Syria has acknowledged a central government that has joined the global coalition to defeat ISIS. This shifts the rationale for the US SDF partnership. The original purpose of SDF as the primary anti-ISIS force on the ground has largely expired. And in fact, he goes on to say that Jolani and the HTS forces will take control of the ISIS holding camps. Meanwhile, of course, the majority of Jolani's Takfiri forces comprise ISIS members. So guess what? They're actually releasing ISIS members from the prisons. I think there's 9 prisons in the northeast, holding up to 100,000 ISIS fighters and their families. But then if we look at what Lindsey Graham is saying, who's come slightly more to prominence recently under Trump, he says it would be a disaster for US reputation and national security interest to abandon the Kurds. I will be introducing legislation this week designed to impose crippling sanctions on any government or group engaged in hostilities against the Kurds, the Save the Kurds Act. So this is getting a little bit silly now because Trump has just allegedly withdrawn the Caesar sanctions on Jolani's government, whereas now Lindsey Graham is going to bring in an act to reimpose sanctions on the HTS government for the massacres that are now being committed against Kurdish civilians in the areas where HTS is advancing. Then let's have a look. And this is, in my opinion, entirely what this is all about. This is from US Central Command, CENTCOM. US forces launch mission in Syria to, guess what, transfer ISIS detainees to Iraq. So what are they actually saying? They're saying the transfer mission began while US forces successfully transported 150 ISIS fighters held at a detention facility in Hasaka, Syria, to a secure location in Iraq. Ultimately, up to 7,000 ISIS detainees could be transferred from Syria to Iraqi controlled facilities. Now, I'm sure this has absolutely nothing to do with the upcoming potential aggression against Iran. Trump is bringing in his big, beautiful armada, as he's described it. If we just move on, Trump is saying, I'm hearing that the great country of Iraq might make a very bad choice by reinstating Nouri al-Maliki as prime minister. Last time Maliki was in power, the country descended into poverty and total chaos, nothing to do with the United States, of course. That should not be allowed to happen again. Because, of course, how Trump perceives it and how the region perceives it, Nouri al-Maliki will be very sympathetic to Iran with the upcoming aggression yet again. He also says, Trump, make Iraq great again. And I just wanted to include, so the fact that ISIS is now being transferred from Syria to Iraq, Russia is withdrawing its troops from the Karmishli base in the northeast, and Jolani is in Moscow today to discuss the movements and the bilateral agreement with Putin. I'll leave people to speculate on exactly what that means. But I wanted to draw attention also to the UK involvement in the ISIS camps in the northeast, because again, I'm sure people are probably saying, well, this has nothing to do with the UK. In 2021, the UK provided funding for the expansion of one of the ISIS camps in Hasaka, northeast Syria. Rather than repatriate British nationals, the UK Foreign Office condemned them to a life imprisonment in conditions that are described as inhumane by various human rights groups. According to a report in Defence One, the effort will double in size the current facility at Hasaka, a series of 3 converted school buildings that hold roughly 5,000 prisoners, according to British Army Major General Kevin Cropsey, the coalition's deputy commander for strategy. So Britain very heavily involved in this also. And a recent article, I think in the last 2 days, from Kit Clarenberg, where he talks about leaked documents demonstrating how the MI6 infiltrated ISIS refugee camps and were involved in the indoctrination, particularly of children, in radical ideology. So as we've talked about, the radicalization of elements in the UK that would then be sent to fight alongside al-Qaeda in Syria. The UK apparently appears to have been doing that within the ISIS holding camps that they are funding in the northeast of Syria to effectively be weaponized against resistance movements in the region.
Which we have formed for, Vanessa, with al-Qaeda as well and HTS over the years.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay,
Exactly.
well, I'm sure we'll be talking about that in extra as well. Charles, let's end then with China, because, of course, Mark Carney was in China a week or two ago, and now Keir Starmer has gone.
It's Starmer's turn. He has announced on Twitter, where else, that he has landed in China. You'd be forgiven for thinking he's gone there in his capacity as a postman or a courier. He says I'm here to deliver for the British people. He goes on in his press release to make a point of striking honesty, but obviously an attempt to extract political capital and take the high ground. He said, or at least it was written for him, for years, our approach to China has been dogged by inconsistency, blowing hot and cold from the golden age to ice age. But like it or not, China matters for the UK. And it does seem that he has hit at the heart of the inconsistency surrounding commentary on China, which is to say that people are prepared to make damning criticism of the place whilst remaining absolutely content to rely upon all the goods which are imported from there. But Starmer himself wanting to appear tough, banging the drum for national security. He says, or rather the press release says, that he will be clear that we will not trade economic cooperation for our national security, and he'll raise the areas where we disagree with China. So the language sort of softened to a certain extent. Now, what one has to ask is it coincidence that the BBC has chosen exactly this moment to suggest that the Chinese military is in complete disarray, with an article here, China has purged its highest-ranking military general. Why? Now, this is about the disappearance, in fact, back in November of General Zhang, and he's the most senior figure in the Central Military Commission. And to substantiate their position, the BBC has quoted Lyle Morris from the Rockefeller-funded Asia Society Policy Institute, who speculated that there are lots of rumours floating around. We don't know at this point what is true and what is false. And he went on to be absolutely certain in saying that it's certainly bad for Xi Jinping, for his leadership and control over the People's Liberation Army. Quite how he reached that conclusion remains to be seen. They then asked Associate Professor from the National University of Singapore, who again speculated completely, saying that he'd heard rumours, everything from leaking nuclear secrets to the United States plotting a coup and factional infighting. There are even rumours of a gunfight in Beijing. So essentially the entire BBC article based on nothing but circumspection. The reader is obviously expected to come away with increased suspicion of the Chinese state, and indeed they're to consider that they're now very vulnerable militarily, despite the fact that the People's Liberation Army still numbers over 2 million men and women. Now, whilst I'm not going to claim to have the answers that the BBC couldn't quite grasp, I can point out one or two things that they fail to collide with. The first being that the 15th five-year plan, here shown on the State Council website, begins in March, and General Zhang has been out of the public eye since November, as I said. He's also 75 years old, so like Starmer, perhaps it is time for a change, despite the allegations of corruption and wrongdoing and all sorts of other things, which may indeed be the case as well. Not only that, but the military is looking to modernise. So again, is this coincidence, as the State Council announces that the regulations which will take effect focus on accelerating the modernisation of military theory, optimising the top-level design for innovation in military theory. So is that the sort of change that one would implement with a 75-year-old at the helm? That is simply a question that I might put there. Now, Starmer also referenced the relationship between defence, or as he calls it, national security, and trade. And this is precisely what Trump's Board of Peace is bringing to the fore. And here's the news, the invitation as published by the Chinese embassy in London, all of which puts the spotlight on the relevance and the role of NATO. Now, of the many commentaries out there, I had a look at The Diplomat, which has an article out recently published titled "The Disintegration of NATO Would Not Be in China's Interests." And what they're positing, among other things, is that the Chinese experts have argued that NATO began looking for a new adversary after the Cold War to justify its existence. Not exactly a contentious position necessarily, but of course the point to be brought out of it is that the situation with NATO, which regards China as a challenge rather than a threat, is one of stalemate. So none of this prevents NATO from posturing, and we can consider the awkward confluence of running military operations, as Luke Pollard said, to boost trade. And we're looking here at the Carrier Strike Group, which set off from the United Kingdom last year, touring the South Pacific region. It's occasionally just composed of United Kingdom vessels and aircraft, and occasionally with other NATO fleets. But what they did do whilst they were there was to boast that they transited the South China Sea. Of course, no actual engagement with China, but to refer back to Starmer's point, which is that one so many are so determined to ignore, of course, the United Kingdom imports more from China than any other country except for the United States and Germany. So as things stand, the United Kingdom is much more dependent upon China than China is on the United Kingdom. Now, UK Column is going to be doing more of what we should, which is finding out for ourselves. So we'll hope to be able to bring you greater insight on this in the coming weeks, because Mike and I will be in China for the latter stages of the Starmer visit, and we'll be able to talk a bit more about that in Extra. But for now, Mike, what do you think about the UK's attitude towards China? I suppose especially in light of the comments of Mark Carney and so forth.
Yeah, I think UK has demonstrated absolute schizophrenia with respect to China for a number of years now. We have produced the China report from the House of Lords, I believe. We have decided that Huawei is not appropriate because it's a national security threat to, it's not appropriate to have that on our 5G networks because 5G networks are used for dual use these days. And of course, we don't worry about the fact that our 5G networks are often heavily polluted with Israeli Unit 8200 inspired hardware. So, if we're worried about countries stealing data, which countries is it that we should be most worried about? There seems to be definite efforts to try to demonize China while at the same time keeping relations there. I suspect Britain and Carney probably represents this policy as well, it is very keen to do anything that it can to split China away from Russia if that's if that's how they view the major threat. Yeah, well, it was actually one of the things that the article in The Diplomat went on to refer to. But of course, the line that they take is that Russia is acting, in the sort of mainstream sense in terms of the aggression and whatnot. And what, if anything, do you think Starmer will come away from
China with.
Well, he'll come away with absolutely nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So hence the use of the word deliver rather than
bring back.
Yes, exactly.
Indeed.
Yes. So we'll see what happens there. But as I say, we should have some more commentary on that by next week. So that brings us to more or less, I think, the end of the.
It does indeed, yes.
Yeah.
So we do have to finish there for today, unfortunately, but with much more in extra if you're a UK column member. If you're not a UK column member, maybe you'd like to join us, and that helps us do what we're doing. And you can join us for extra anytime we are hosting a news program. I want to say thank you to Vanessa and Charles, of course, for joining me today, and for everybody that's been watching. Don't forget, if you want to look at the documentation behind the stories that we've covered today, have a look in the show notes. But we'll be back in a few minutes on this stream if you're a UK column member. Otherwise, don't forget the interviews this evening, an interview going out at 1 p.m. tomorrow, news again, 1 p.m. on Friday. We will see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.